Hello and welcome to Birmingham and the new Main Line Canal, which runs right into the heart of the city. Normally quite a sleepy little canal. Today it's hosting a whole cavalcade, yes, a flotilla of boats, which are marking the fact that Birmingham is hosting the Commonwealth Games 2022. And unlike another flotilla event I attended recently, where sadly very few boats came along, this one was clearly going to be jam-packed, as not only were plenty of brightly decorated boats moored along the towpath, but a fair few others had begun chugging past on their way into the centre of the city, ready for the day's parade later that afternoon. Various canal organisations were promoting this, including the Inland Waterways Association and the Birmingham Canal Navigation Society.
We thought we'd pop into Birmingham to support the BCNS for their parade, which is going to take place later today. And we are from the Cotswold Canals. I volunteer with the Cotswold Canals Trust when I'm back home, and that's why we're here.
Quite the mix of boats were coming along, from private weekenders and liverboards to historic and classic craft, operated by charitable organisations and groups. And this wasn't even the assembly point, it was the pre-assembly point, where boats had gathered the night before and would now start heading towards the start of the parade near the Birmingham Roundhouse.
We're going to go down there for about 1 o'clock, and then we'll all kick off at 2 in the afternoon to cruise all the way down to Edgbaston.
And where have you come from?
We've come from Cropreading, which is just north of Banbury.
What with this kind of event and the recent Queen's Jubilee, bunting suppliers must be in seventh heaven this year. As I watched, boaters began loosening their mooring pins, and one by one they headed off. However, the boat I'd been invited to join wasn't in amongst this lot, so I wandered down the towpath, a steady stream of boats passing as I did, until I reached the Engine Arm Aqueduct. That's one canal going over the other on this magnificent cast iron construction dating from 1828. Moored just beyond was a boat, and on the towpath 2 dogs, that should look familiar if you saw my recent video about hybrid narrowboats. For this is Old Nick, powered by an electric motor backed by solar and a generator. And these are Bill and Ted, ship's dogs. Further back, yet more boats waiting to join the party, although some had already left, and as I went aboard, the others cast off and departed. With the boat that had been tied alongside setting off as well, Old Nick was now free to switch on the batteries, rev up the electric motor, and glide off in blissful silence, except for an odd squeak from the motor and the tinkle of the prop shaft. We approached the first of 2 toll islands, which once would have had a brick toll house on them, measuring and charging the working boats based on the cargo they carried. I wanted to leap off here with a strimmer and give those weeds a damn good thrashing. Some other time, perhaps. It is all inevitably urban and industrial here, the canal wending its way through the West Birmingham outskirts. It runs pretty much straight from Tipton to the centre, the new line that we're on having been built to bypass a much more winding route, now known as the Old Main Line. The change cut the distance to Wolverhampton by 7 miles. That was a lot for horse-drawn narrowboats in the 19th century. Now it's a calming oasis for boaters, anglers, walkers and cyclists.
And all the plastic bags lurking in the bottom.
Hang on, that's facing the wrong way. although at that length it can probably turn around anywhere. Note, when boating with bunting in Birmingham, low bridges may require removal of said bunting before you can proceed. It was getting very blustery. These curvaceous bridges once led off to little arms of the canal, where businesses would load and unload goods. The one on the right still does, the Cape Arm going for just over 1,000 feet, a little over 300 metres. Here's the second tolling stop, which also needs attention from a lawnmower. This was a hell of a procession. It must have been quite surprising to folks on the towpath who didn't know what was going on. But the skies were against us, despite it being mid-June. As the rain fell gently, I abandoned Paul at the tiller and hid inside in the dry, watching our progress through the duck hatch, where you really notice how quiet electric boating is. The old canal route veered off under that bridge here, and now forms a semicircular path called the Icknield Port Loop, emerging a few hundred yards further on. We carried straight on, but some boats went down the loop, where new apartments have been built. Here's where the loop rejoins. Just as we passed, the distinctive chug of a classic engine was heard, and a heritage workboat emerged, towing an unpowered butty. This is quite the feat of steering for those on both boats. Very impressive to see. A further challenge was immediately ahead, as this was where all the boats were pausing for lunch before the official procession took place that afternoon. Pity the poor day trip boats trying to work through us lot. We edged forward, unsure where to stop. Most other boats seemed to be at least double moored already.
Look at that right there.
We let another couple of Canal and River Trust boats through as they had their own area to stop. Bill and Ted kept a lookout for moorings. Finally, we found some solo boats and we breasted up against one of them, although pins banged into concrete is never a good recipe for staying put. But it worked. There were so many people taking part. 80 boats, I heard. I went to chat with the Heritage Boat people.
Today we're on a pair of boats, Scorpio and Leo. Scorpio is the motor, so that's the boat with the engine. Leo is the unpowered butty, so pulled everywhere by Scorpio. So these would have worked as a pair carrying double the amount of cargo with still being handled by a small crew of just sort of one family. These were built in 1936 and are looked after by the Heritage Working Boats Group. They've taken a number of old working boats on behalf of British Waterways then and now Canal and River Trust, and they were restored and they're now used by the volunteers from the group to go to events like this one today and educational events to promote the canals. And we do a lot with local schools and get school children in the holds doing lessons. So try and promoting the canals as much as we can around, especially around Birmingham area.
I also met a chap from one of the many canal restoration societies.
There was a bit of canal that was infilled in the late 50s, 9 locks which we're trying to restore. There is a bit of the canal left from Moorcroft Junction on the Walsall Canal up to the bottom lock, which we've been clearing all the vegetation, and it's now a pleasant area to walk. And we are working on a scheme to rebuild the locks and connect the two canals together. That's the Wolverhampton-Birmingham Canal and the Walsall Canal.
Amongst all the modern and traditional steel narrowboats, this entirely wooden canal cruiser stood out.
Built by my father in Stourport. He started in 1950 building boats down in Stourport Basin. And then he moved up to above the York Street Lock, and this was built in 1965 up there. Basically it's plywood construction, which is a bit vulnerable amongst all these steel boats. We're a bit frightened. The whole of the bottom of the boat, which of course is still plywood, has been replaced, and about 9 inches up the side. The gunnels have all been replaced as well, and the front deck. Really the only thing that hasn't been replaced is the main body of the side and the cabin and the roof. Everything else has been. So, a bit like Triggs Broom really. People want to know about her because she's different. But there's a lot of narrow boats around. Some of the heritage ones obviously are fascinating, but most of them are much of a muchness, and she stands out in the crowd, so people talk to you about her.
Time was ticking on.
Well, after a very pleasant spot of lunch, cup of tea and all that, the horns have sounded. Now it's time to actually set off for the procession through the middle of Birmingham. Everyone started untying their ropes. In a moment we will be off.
All around the boats were a riot of colour. Some, like Paul from Narrowboat Natterings, had taken the dressing up idea to heart.
Traditional boating attire.
Others really couldn't care less. With instructions from the organisers to make some noise rather than just being a staid convoy, the boats began to leave. For many, the engine was the sweet music. Frustratingly, the weather wasn't being helpful, though some boaters had anticipated this. Hats off to this tug from a local museum, which I keep meaning to go and visit. It's supposed to be very good. There's a part of me that would like a flat like these, overlooking the canal, a little balcony, gin and tonic. Perfect. We passed several moored boats that were nothing to do with the event, but who all chirped a cheery greeting and a wave. We also went past the giant giraffe made from Lego. And many a passerby paused, photography prompted. Including the men in black. Here's another of those old loops, down which is some mooring and a wharf. To the left of the roundabout at Old Turn Junction are 2 flights of locks heading north out of the city, but we were going right to the east. The many boats were certainly causing quite the spectacle to the enjoyment of unwitting gongoozlers. This is the centre of Birmingham, at least as far as the canals are concerned. Now at this point a confession. As you may have seen, either live when it happened, or since then as a recording here on the channel, it was at this point I picked up my phone, and without any planning or forethought, began to do a live stream of the trip. Unfortunately, this meant I didn't record any of the next few minutes on my camcorder, so the footage here, which I've taken from that live stream, is poor quality and wobbly. Normal service is resumed very shortly. Please bear with me. You go under Broad Street and an Indian restaurant, emerging into Gas Street Basin, technically the start of the Worcester and Birmingham Canal. It's here you go through Worcester Bar, a narrowing section designed to keep that canal physically separate from the Birmingham Canal, so that water wouldn't be stolen by one canal company from the other, and so that tolls could be levied on the passing boats. Now the canals just join up here, and you'd never know that goods once had to be lifted from one canal to boats on the other. Contrary to appearances, that's not Megatron, but an apartment building. It's a 90-degree right turn here to start heading south and out of the city. Phew, back on the camcorder again now, and the only thing left for all the boats to do was head to the winding hole or turning point at Edgbaston. Given how much you're still in the city, it's surprisingly green and delightful. Bill and Ted nipped off for a wee, though Ted had a sore paw and needed a lift. He's much better now, you'll be pleased to hear. A steady train of boats was behind and ahead, and it was at this point the logistics of the day began to fall apart, with the first boats at the head of the procession having turned and now coming back, only to meet all the rest of us still coming out. That meant jams at the bridge hole, though these were relatively minor, with lots of waving between the boats to establish who'd go when. Far worse was to come at the short Edgbaston Tunnel. It used to be wide enough for two-way traffic, but the Canal and River Trust recently extended the towpath for cyclists and pedestrians, so now only one boat can pass at a time. Usually this wouldn't be an issue. There aren't hordes of boats trying to go through here all the time. But on this day it was chaos, as the boats coming through couldn't see that there wasn't room for them on this side, where we were all now queuing to turn at the winding hole. And bizarrely, marshals had been stationed at the turning point, where we could all do our thing without any assistance, and not at the tunnel mouths where they were needed. It was gridlock, and we heard frayed tempers, although most people just sucked it up as being typical of canal boating, essentially shambolic. After an eternity, we reached the front, having been waved through by Lumpy on the boat ahead, who wanted to let a friend catch him up.
See you guys.
See ya. Enjoy. Oh, we'll see in a minute. Yeah.
And Paul could turn the boat swiftly around. It seemed quite a few boaters weren't coming back, but had moored just beyond. We headed back towards town where I'd get off, and Paul and Kay, plus their dogs, would continue their travels. Thanks for watching. Cheerio.